Hey, this is Mike with Biel Watches, and today we're going to show you how we authenticate a watch. Check it out. So first things first, you always have to know who you are buying from. That's the first thing. You buy the seller first and then the watch. So if there's any red flags that are, sticking out to you, standing out to you, then please keep that in mind. Trust your gut. So the first thing I like to do is I like to start with a big picture and work my way in. And that starts all with the box. So with this, what you're looking for is obviously how it feels, how it looks. For me, I have a lot of watch boxes that I've had in my possession, so it's something where I can easily compare it to other stuff. But what you're checking for, it might be a smell. What you'd be looking for is like a very cheap sort of epoxy or glue that's being used. That is something that could be standing out to you as it being a fake box. Now, has there been fake boxes with real watches and vice versa? Absolutely. But if I start big picture and this is already a red flag, I know to really put everything else under the microscope. We do anyways, but this just makes it sort of like, get your spidey senses up a bit. Also, the quality. Is the pillow made well? Is the box made well? You're checking the accessories. All that stuff has to stand out as being good. There's different, manuals and whatnot. Like I said, these are available on eBay and stuff. So someone could easily just spend a couple $100 on a real box and throw a fake watch in there. Okay, so let's talk about the warranty card. I did cover it, the serial number just for privacy, but they come in a couple different flavors depending on the year of the watch. So what you're checking for is that it matches. This corresponds to a 2016 watch. This is the proper card, so that's good. Next thing is, do the serial numbers match? On that engraved rehaut at the 6 o'clock, there is the serial number. That used to be on older watches where in between the lugs. So you check to make sure that that matches. That's number 2. These cards can be forged. They have been forged and will continue to be forged. But there are some things that we can do with a UV light here. I'm not sure if you can see it. I'll probably have some B-roll, but there should be sort of a hologram that shows up in the top corner. I'll throw some B-roll in there for you on that does it better. I see the hologram. We are good there. Also, these various lines that separate the card have actual writing in there, very, very small. On the back too, has all the information of where it was purchased in this particular one, the date of purchase, and you're checking for stuff here. If the card has been altered, you'd be checking if like a 0 turned into a 6 or a 0 turned into a 9 to make it appear newer. The newer cards from most recent years have like an NFC reader in there. You can put it up to your phone. It'll actually take you to Rolex's website. It also has that hologram that we talked about. It's in a different spot. But Rolex is always continuing to improve and adapt to counterfeits and trying to always stay, one ahead of the competition with that. All right, now let's get into the actual watch. So, the box passed. We're going to move on. And the first thing I would do is when I get the watch, it typically is all put together. I did take it down just to save time for this video. But you're going over the overall feel. How does the watch, how's the weight? How does the movement work when you're adjusting it? You pull the crown out, the winding. Is the hand stack in the correct order? How's it feeling? And just that overall, robustness of a watch. The watch that we are authenticating is a Polar Explorer 2. This is the newer style reference in 42 millimeters. So, that's one of the things that we are checking how the date wheel turns and just checking the overall functionality. Now, another thing we're doing, looking at that second hand, what we are doing there is making sure that it is a sweeping second hand and it's not like a tick, tick, tick that you would see in like a quartz watch. There are quartz watches out there. Rolex, this should not be a quartz watch. So that is another dead giveaway. As I mentioned before, we start big picture and we work our way down. You could have real outside parts. You could have a real bracelet, and you could have a fake movement or something inside. So this just gives me that first sort of next, working my way down. A lot of these super clones out there, they do look pretty good, but they start to fall apart under a loupe, which is a magnifying glass. So that's something where this first overall inspection is just checking those types of things. Next thing, I'm also checking to make sure that the watch is as described by the seller. We are in a nice network of trusted dealers, but you still have to go through and check and do your due diligence. So in this watch, got it from a dealer. I'm checking for the engravings. There's engravings on the front and the back over here where the the end links would be. So you have to take the bracelet apart for that. I am also checking to make sure that the seller disclosed the right stuff. If they said it's got a clean crystal, if it's got, you know, no dings or hairlines, I'm checking for that. So what I'm checking is to make sure that the chamfers, those little edges of the watch, are still sharp and pronounced. I'm also checking to make sure that there hasn't been, you know, over polishing done. There's a fine way to do it. There's a good way and obviously a bad way. Another thing that we do is we put the watch on a time grapher. This is all part of just making sure that the watch is accurately described. So what the time grapher does is it tells you how the watch is running. It's kind of a quick little health check of the watch, and it can give you an idea of, you know, the how long it might be for you to like want to get the watch serviced. Obviously, if the watch has some issues with it, if the date wheel is not turning and stuff like that, things are sticking, then you got to make sure that you get the watch serviced. But it kind of gives you an idea of how many years or so you can get away without needing the watch serviced. You know, it's checking how the bracelet feels, how the clasp is responsive or not. You're checking these engravings in here. So we're starting to work our way in. There's also some engravings right here on the end links. You're checking for the Rolex coronet. Another thing I'm checking for is the link count. A lot of times people will keep a link off to the side. They won't tell you. And then you have a watch that's not fully linked. So the next thing we're going to do is pop open the case back and check the movement. Okay, so I have the movement exposed. We took the case back off. I'm also checking in here to see if there has been any watchmaker, you know, sort of stampings in here. Sometimes they use a marker. Sometimes they actually etch it in there. Sometimes they do both. Now moving on to the movement, this could be a whole video in itself. I'll probably do some B-roll here. We can get some nice footage of that. But I have the movement here. What I'm doing is checking to make sure that we have a couple things regarding the movement. Once again, we're checking the quality. This is where a watch will start to break down. So if I see something that completely stands out, it's probably a fake movement. But we're checking that all the different, you know, that precision and just that Rolex quality translates into the movement. You know, you're going to check to see if someone really manhandled the screws, if there's any sort of issues like that. So I'll do a little B-roll footage here. You can kind of see what a good Rolex movement looks like. But yeah, this one for this model looks good. The movement could always be authentic and real, and then the actual, you know, the dial, the hands, other, you know, even the case or whatnot could always be fake. So now this is kind of where the super clones start to fall apart. A super clone would have a really nice movement. Oftentimes they do follow, you know, what Rolex has. Very hard to detect. Or, like I said, they actually have a couple $1,000, you know, Rolex movement in there. So now we are going to get out the loop, and the loop is basically a microscope and a magnifying glass, and this is going to allow me to dive into the watch. You'll start seeing cheaper laser engraving etching and not that Rolex quality. But that's one thing to make note of at this point is, does this watch possess the Rolex quality? So I dive into it. By looking in, I'm checking for dust. I'm checking for, you know, the shoddy craftsmanship that might, you know, be from like a rush job. I'm also checking the type of font. I'm checking to make sure everything is there. Now I'm diving into the serial number. You know, is the serial number visible? Does it match the paperwork in the card? And all those things. So I'm going to continue looking. You know, I'm checking to see how the UV light reacts and all that good stuff. And once again, just checking the indices, making sure dial's not repainted, making sure there's no scratches on the dial. If something happened, it could scratch like that lacquer finish. So I'm checking the quality and making sure that, once again, this watch is as described. The next thing I'm going to do is check out the crystal. Now, the watch could all be 100% authentic, and there could be an aftermarket crystal on this watch, and that would be something that is fine. It just has to be disclosed. So, you know, you want to make sure that the person gets exactly what they are, you know, purchasing. So what we would be looking for is a etched coronet crown at the 6 o'clock position. So it's hard to find. It's not, you know, as easy on watches Sometimes lighting plays a fact. If there is one that stands out at you and it's on the crystal the whole time without you having to get out a magnifying glass and stuff, chances are that is a uber fake and a cheap fake. So keep an eye on that. And I do see the crown, so we are good there. I believe I mentioned it before, but that engraved rehaut, that's the thing in between the dial and the crystal. It's that metal. And the other thing to make note of is how it is engraved. These super clones really break down under that microscope like I talked about. So what you're looking for is sort of like a better etching, better quality. It's not a cheap laser that might have engraved it. So the engraved rehaut actually has Rolex written a bunch of times. At the 6 o'clock there is the serial number, and Rolex is written a bunch. So at the 12 o'clock you should see a crown, and then it says Rolex, Rolex, Rolex over and over. On the one side you should have the X from 1 to 6 o'clock. The X is going to be interacting right in the center of an indice. If that starts breaking apart, now you have an issue. From 6 to 12 on the other side, the R is what interacts. It's sort of like just in line with the indices. So this watch, in my opinion, is good. I always have my watchmaker, Matt, give it a look as well, and then we have this as ready to go and good for sale. And this should give you sort of an overall just general understanding. There is a lot more that goes into this. I kind of gave you a crash course. Obviously, don't take this as the say-all be-all. Do your own due diligence and make sure that if you have a question about something, that you get it answered, and you get it answered by somebody who knows what they're doing and knows what they're talking about. So always have a good watchmaker, and as always, have a dealer that will sell you the watch, that stands behind the watch, and will verify that it is authentic, and will make sure that they are with you every step of the way through the process. Hope this video was helpful. Please reach out if you have any other questions, and you can always check us out at bielwatches.com. Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.